All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's lovely to have you here on my campuses. I'm kind of the doctor of Doctor Who, which makes people laugh. They're like, can you look at this academically? And you can. What I'm going to talk about today is based on a chapter that I've written in a new book. I always feel bad about academic books. This thing is like $120 because it's meant for college libraries or whatnot, and there are academics all over the UK and the US who've written chapters in it. And of course, it's about the era, the new dawn, the era of the Jodie Whittaker Doctor. So when I saw this go up, I said, well, I have a lot to say about screenwriting because officially, this is who I am. I love that picture because it was taken at my college for an article they did on me. I work for a school called Stevens College, and we teach an MFA in screenwriting. And so I always look at everything from the point of view of the person who wrote this material. I really am very interested in screenwriters, more than directors, because people sometimes will credit a director, and I'm like, well, they didn't make up the story. If you like the twist or the character or a piece of dialogue, they didn't make that up. They just put the cameras in a lovely place and accented it. So let's think about the people who wrote these things. And so that's what I do. I came out of television into academia, so I worked on these shows earlier in my career and learned a lot from the people who ran them, right? 90210, very popular still. Always shocked about that because there's been lots of teen shows, but I think we learned that they took these teenagers seriously. And when you take your characters seriously, they become friends to the people who watch. And I obviously believe that's true in Doctor Who. We all have our favorite doctors. Mine actually goes back to classic Who. I'm a Peter Davison person. But our companions, I mean, they are about bringing friends into our home. That's how TV is different than film, because you have to pay to go see the people in the films. But these people come into our homes where we're having coffee or, you know, having pizza or whatever. So I really think it's interesting to look at why we fall in love with these characters, and for me, of course, it comes from the writing. I also am in editorial boards for different things. Written by Magazine is the magazine of the Writers Guild. I have a sample of it over there. I got lucky one time when Russell was in town doing Miracle Day. The editor was like, I know you're a Doctor Who fan. Would you like to interview him? And I was like, yes, I would love to sit in a room and chat with him. And it turned out few journalists are as Whovian of a fan, and so we ended up chatting longer than I was meant to be there, and the publicist would walk by and go, are you all done yet? And I thought, oh, they're going to kick me out. And then Russell was like, in a minute, and he'd send the publisher away. So I laughed. So written by Magazine, journal screenwriting, again, obviously coming from that standpoint. And California History, I do some pop culture for them. So I'm trying to figure out how to get some Doctor Who in there, right? I'm a little behind on Matt having actually been in the West, but maybe I'll get something on there. This is the piece that I did for Written By, and as I said, it's a sample over there. It was really fun to sort of sit in the room with him. I do think he's one of my favorite writers, and that made me very happy. And then these are a bunch of other books and things that I've read, so you kind of know where I'm coming from and where these opinions come, because I do know I have two very favorite, my very favorite fandoms are Doctor Who and the Monkees. And somebody did this lovely piece of fan art, which I just fell in love with. So I love how fandom blends together and, you know, the whole community that you create with other people who love what you love. But today we're going to talk about the writing of this new female doctor, right? I used to actually have a Matt outfit I like to wear, and I had a Peter outfit that I like to wear. But now I'm going to have to go with the fact that, hello, I bought this 2 years ago here at WhoCon, so it was really fun. Anyway, this was actually the title, and this is a line, right, from the first episode. What I loved is this business, right? She's wise and unafraid, and I believe in her. One of the things I noticed about what Chibnall had to do right away, and I know that we all have some gripes about some of the stuff he's done, but I think that he made some very good choices in the beginning, and a lot of that has to do with writing and hiring some other very good writers who brought in some aspects of the show we hadn't had before. But this line I really like. I also think it's an example of how he promised to sort of give the show a bit of a female gaze, right? And I love all the dudes who's ever been on Doctor Who. Well, maybe not Colin Baker so much, but you know, in general, do love them all. But he made a promise, and I think he kept it. I think he didn't just sort of gloss over and pretend, and I think we'll see that in the choice of guest characters, the choice of people we get to meet, right down to the fact that we met Ada Lovelace, who we've kind of heard about, but I'll still mention her in some classes, and people don't know who she is. So the fact that he's giving a moment here for people to go, oh, that's an interesting woman I need to know some more about. And I think he scattered the show with those types of characters, those types of historical people we would not have met had he not kept in mind, I've promised to give this a kind of a different spin. right? So that really impresses me. I think we have to look at his early work to see that he was capable of doing this, right? When I think about the early episodes that he wrote, obviously before he became the executive producer, almost every episode had an important leader who was a female. And that just sort of glosses over you when you're looking at it. But when you put it all together, like every single time, he was trying to find a way to show us a woman in charge. So he was really building up to be the guy, the showrunner, who would be able to do a full female character. But if you think about this, right, Hungry Earth, we've got Dr. Machine. That's a really cool thing. Could have been a boy doctor, was a girl doctor, right? Writers make those choices all the time. Captain Kath in 42, right, has to go through that terrible experience. She could have been a male captain of the ship, right? It wouldn't have hurt. And then I just adore Kate Lethbridge-Stewart. I think she's marvelous. There's actually another TV show in the UK called Grantchester. It's about a vicar. Now his mother is played by the actress who played Kate, so it's kind of fun to see her in different roles. But so he did this, so Chibnall did this in his early work, and now outside of Doctor Who, I'm really impressed with some of the stuff he's done, again, involving strong female characters. I tend to teach Broadchurch. I think it's one of the best mini-series that I've ever seen. I always think something's really good if I can't guess the ending, because yeah, then you're like, okay, you got me, because I'm really looking at every single moment. And if I don't know, then you have done some very good writing, and I really love that. I think, of course, looking at the fact that Olivia Colman, before she won her Oscar, and now her Emmy for The Crown, recognizing a powerful actress a little bit earlier than other people did, and bringing her forth. And of course, because of Broadchurch, we get to Jodie, right? And she, in the midst of this terrible tragedy, was as strong a person as she could be. She wasn't just in a corner weeping and crying and all of that. So I think he's always treated women intelligently and respectfully, which I think is good. And of course, Torchwood, which I'm talking about tomorrow, because I think Torchwood does still matter, and I adore Torchwood, and I think it ended too soon. And that's probably where I get mad at Russell, because I don't think it needed Miracle Day. But there you go. That's something we'll talk about tomorrow. So I think Chibnall was set up to do this. So when I think about the job of a head writer, in the States, we call that a showrunner. And they're using that term a little bit in England, not so much, but a little. They're sort of getting into that. So the showrunner's job is everything. You're really, truly, in television, the writer is in charge. You're producing the whole thing. In film, a director comes in after a script has been bought. They can hire other writers. They can make changes. By the time it's done, sometimes you don't even recognize it as your own work. In TV, if you know about Shonda Rhimes and the other big showrunners, they're in charge all the way through, and it's the directors who come and go episode to episode. So in this case, I'm looking at him as a showrunner and what he provided to the show. And in the very beginning, of course, he's the first guy that had the guts to change the character into a female. It had been hinted at, chatted about since Tom Baker's day. We knew that it could happen. We heard about other Time Lords who changed genders. Nobody quite had the guts to do it. Even Steven toyed with it between Matt and Peter. And I love Peter Capaldi, he's an excellent actor. But there was the moment there, and he just kind of went, no, not yet, right? So I think Chris had the guts, and we have to give him some credit for that. And it's important that Jodie recognized it was going to be a little shocking to people. And again, love Peter, but there was a little moment where Peter was like, well, I think boys are losing a role model. And then somebody said, dude, women can be role models to men. It's okay, right? And boys can see strong women in the world. That's actually going to be good for them later in life. So it was a little delicate, and he took the shot. The other important thing is casting who would be around her. So as the showrunner, he is casting all of these new characters, and he's inventing them from scratch. And so we looked at this group of people and thought, okay, who does he surround the first female doctor with? And it was important to him. I also think he promised and mostly came through on diversity. And diversity is one of those words that gets tossed around a lot. Some people are saying, let's get rid of that word, let's go with inclusion. It just means, let's tell more stories. Let's tell a wider range of stories that we haven't had a chance to see before. So he committed to that, and by virtue of who he chose to follow her, obviously we're going to get some different stories that had not yet. I mean, it's 50 plus years of a TV show. What new things can you possibly write? And of course, for the Doctor, that comes from the people who follow him. So I think that these were very good choices. If we look here, obviously we have, again, female leadership. The police person is Yaz, right? It's a woman police officer who's going to come and join. So now we're going to have two relatively powerful women running things, and that's different for us. I mean, I like Tegan too, she was fun, but you know, little screamy, goofy, right? And Nyssa was a doctor, so Nyssa, I really enjoyed Nyssa. So finding two strong women in stories is very interesting. What she had to do, what Chibnall had to do, is we've fallen into a pattern where all the companions fall in love with the doctor. And that was cool with Amy. That was like, okay, romantic storyline. And I frankly love the fact that Martha had the guts to say, dude, you're never going to feel the way I feel, and I'm not wasting my time. That, to me, was like the most grown-up thing I had seen a woman do. So very cool. That's when yes, she really, like, then you're like, oh, she's like one of my favorite companions. So, all right, so we're falling into that, right? So how do you avoid that with the first female doctor? Well, pretty smart. We're going to give you a young man who's at least 15 years younger than of course, the doctor's years and years old, but the visual person. So if you think about it, Tussin is about 15 years younger than her, and Graham is about 15 years older. So our brains aren't going to immediately go, hey, are they going to fall in love? So he avoided that, but he also had to think about the male characters. They can't be stronger than her, because that would ruin her ability to be the most important character. So we've got a very young man. Ryan should be as strong or stronger than as Jodie Whittaker appears in life. So they gave him dyspraxia, right? They gave him a bit of a handicap that puts him a little bit behind, right? So I had to think about that. It's not a bad one. It's not one that, you know, gets in the way too much, but it keeps him from jumping in and saving the day, which I have to think about. And of course, Graham is overcoming cancer. So likewise, is a stronger man, but he's actually stronger emotionally, which I think is really, again, an interesting role model for us. So this was a lot of thinking. As we know with any of the showrunners, every time they invent a companion, they have to really think through, what am I providing the show? And I think that Chibnall did a good job with that. These issues of finding men who can be strong but not stronger than have happened in television before. I'm a huge Buffy fan, all right? I could do many a lecture on Buffy. And think about it, right? We had both David Boreanaz and James Marsters. Of course, Marsters will appear in Torchwood for us again later. They had to be strong, but she always was the one who solved the problem. It was her skill that did it, whether it was the strength of her emotion that she could avoid how much she loved Angel in order to have to kill him. Spoiler alert if you're not a Buffy fan. But that's a really tricky thing. And also, of course, even Xander, they dealt with a character who could be strong, again, emotionally, but he was never physically stronger than Buffy, right? You could say the same, obviously, for the current day Wonder Woman, right? How do you balance that out? And that was Alan Heinberg, who's a wonderful writer, came out of the Shondaland universe and then ended up doing Wonder Woman. He's now doing Sandman in the UK with Neil Gaiman. So again, the Doctor Who connection, and that's coming out later this year. And of course, this goes back to the 70s and the Bionic Woman, who was surrounded by men who had to be intelligent and helpful, but not better than her. So this is something Chibnall had to have in mind as he put this together. Then he had to think about the guest actors, the people who would come and go in different episodes. And I think, again, look at what he gave us in terms of powerful female characters, right? I love Yaz's Nan, right? I adore that episode. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. I know. Grace. Now, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow, because that's a little bit of how Torchwood changed television in a smart way, because he's using the same trick he used on Susie, right? We all thought she was a regular, and then she wasn't. And that's how else you get the modern world who reads everything out of Deadline and Variety and all online. How do you get them? And you got to have that gut punch moment. But he did a good job of keeping the character alive, both in the dialogue, right? And then Graham saw her a few times, and Ryan was always talking about her, so that's pretty cool. And then, of course, the two women in Witchfinders are strong, powerful women on different sides of the debate of what was going on in terms of witches. So all these, again, strong females that he's bringing forward comes from the writer's room, and they do those a little bit differently in the UK as well. They don't necessarily have everyone on staff meeting every day the way we do in the States, but he hired a group of people to write certain freelance episodes, expecting to get this variety of stories that we had not yet seen before. And so he was looking to hire more women, of course, and more people of color, which was not, a record that Doctor Who had going well for it, even moving into the Stephen Moffat years. So he made a commitment, and he followed through. What's interesting about a lot of these writers is they came out of theater, where there's a little bit more chance sometimes, because you can do smaller plays in smaller locations around the country, and then someone can sample your writing. It's hard to break into television. Even in the UK, it's even a smaller business than here. So he was looking into other places to find new writers for these shows. And I think he succeeded there. Again, he promised that all the stories would be more gendered in terms of more female focused. And so think about the people we met along the way, all right? Obviously, they decided to do the Rosa Story, which I find interesting from an American perspective, because here's a large piece of American history. We're going to see how it is envisioned by another country, right? I loved when they asked Ryan, what do you know about her? He's like, she was a bus driver. Why should he? Like, he doesn't have to know that. We know that because we teach it to our kids more often. In the same way that if we asked about certain kings, I'm not sure which one did what. Who signed the Magna Carta again? I don't know. Do we teach that in the States as much as they, So it was a lovely moment to go, the whole world isn't America focused, right? There's a bigger world out there. But again, a great choice to do her as a character. We even had a female Jean, right? That's like, okay, they're ugly elephant rhino characters, right? But there's females in there somewhere. No one ever mentioned that before. So he's really thinking about it all the way. And I've never forgot how cool it was. I had never heard of Noor Inayat Khan, right? I had never heard the story, and now I know, right? I know that there were women who were doing radio operations and all this stuff in World War II. I wouldn't have known that, except he decided to include her as an example of a female hero. So I think he's really going wide to give us these stories, and that impresses me, right? Now, yes, please, go ahead.
You had a picture of the other doctor that was featured. I felt like she was written much more strong and really fascinating, and I wanted her to come back.
I assume she's going to.
I mean, she's a doctor, I was like, I wish she was the first female doctor because she was that good.
She was. I totally agree, and I assume, obviously, we're going to see that again in the upcoming set of episodes. I think there is an example of a writer who then listened to fandom, obviously listened to The Loss of Grace, and he kind of knew that was going to happen, and knew that he wanted to provide a woman of color who was powerful and interesting. So yeah, I think he may not have planned that, a year earlier, and then his brain started ticking, and he went, I know how I can do this, right? And I can play with the time and play with it. And so now we are all going, but how does she fit in the story? And at what point did that happen, right? So yes, I agree. I think she's quite an interesting character, and I think they can't not use her again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right? Then it's up to how Russell deals with that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I really think it's interesting, especially because of what you were saying about like fitting into the timeline with like all the theories and stuff, and it's if some of the, theory, it's fostering the idea of not only was it like there is a female doctor, but it's not like there could have been already a female doctor, and like there were female timeless children. Like that's like the first one was female. Like, and just like and of course you're talking about like Tech David and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting because a lot of times if it's more of like we're gonna put a band-aid on it by making a female doctor, but instead he was like, it's organically always been there, and I'm gonna show it like that.
Exactly. Oh no, I think he, whether he planned that ahead of Jodie or that's part of what he learned when he saw how this was received and said, oh, I didn't quite get as far as I should have gone. Let me add to that. I mean, that's the beauty of Doctor Who. It's a fairy tale. You can add all kinds of stuff to it over and over. Layering, exactly, which is what I think is the reason we all keep coming back to watch it. I mean, and why it's, I think, really quality writing. Yes.
There have been female Time Lords throughout the series. It's just that they haven't given them the top position in the Star Wars.
Exactly. They always referenced him. In fact, I have a whole nother talk that goes all the way through. It's Tom Baker's the first guy that goes, well, or girl. He starts referencing it, and then the other writers start. And then, of course, we have Matt's guy, when he does the Doctor's Wife, we see the little boxes like, oh, I remember him. He was great when he was a she, and et cetera. So they really were laying it in. But yeah, it had never been our Doctor. Until now we have to figure out, how did this lady fit in the picture and when? But wasn't that a lovely episode though? You start going, wait, is there a watch? Oh no, I know. And yeah, I think it was just like your brain kept going, am I hearing what I think I'm hearing? Yeah, again, I think that was nicely done. All right, so of course we have to talk about the costume a little bit. Of course he decided on that, hello. I know there was a lot of chit chat about, well, what is that? That's not a great outfit. And here I am wearing it. I did like the one she was introduced in, but all black is not good for lighting, guys. It's not exciting to look at on screen for too long. But see, this is where I think he was smart. I've never noticed earlier doctors changing as much. And I think whether he took cosplaying into consideration or whether he just wanted to make sure she had more things to do. I really appreciate, because I've seen the welding cosplay at a couple cons. I love the tuxedo and that she's wearing the pants. I mean, come on, she's not gonna wear a dress. You can't run around and do important things and like save the world in a dress. So I think that they did some really interesting stuff. And I like the way that he homages different people. Again, Peter's in here and, you know, Tom is in here. Every time you got to think about, how's this person going to look? What are they going to wear on a regular basis? So, you know, I think he did the best he could right there. Could I have designed something else? I don't know. Yes?
I've always wondered, right now that you're mentioning that they're trying to portray the equality of, you know, female versus male and all that. I wonder if the colors were purposely designed in her costume, in her daily, you know, outfit.
Oh, they were.
Is there like a meaning behind that?
There were. Partially were reflecting Tom's scarf back in the day, and partially were reflecting the rainbow, right? Because, again, inclusion. But in this sort of gentle, historic to Who, but also modern for now world. And there's also a lavender line in here, which doesn't show up in Tom's scarf, but is a reference to the suffragettes, because they wore lavender sashes in the UK when they were marching. So it's kind of a cool little thing they added. Yeah, yeah, they gave it much thought. And this is him in consultation with costumers. There is a great show on Netflix, what's it called, where they interview, it's the abstract one, right? They interviewed the costume designer who got the Oscar for Black Panther. Yes, it's an hour of her discussing the job of being a costume designer. It's a show on Netflix called Abstract, and they meet a different artist every week. And her name escapes me right now, but she got started on Do the Right Thing, and she got the Oscar for designing the costumes for Black Panther. And it's a whole, like, she got started, she was an actress in college, and she didn't get cast in a play, and they asked her if she would work on costumes. And her grandmother had taught her to sew, and so then she was like, hey, I really actually like this. And she goes through the process of, when I get a script, I break it down, I look at all the characters, what their backstory is, I decide everything that they should look like, what the colors mean, all of that. And then, of course, in consultation with the writer and the producer, we go, what do they like, what don't they like, et cetera, et cetera. So costume is a huge, and this is what a showrunner does. You sit with every single department and you decide and you get the final say. So of course you get the final hit if people don't like what you decided, but that's your job to make decisions, right? And to be able to go, this is why I did that, and maybe I'll change my mind if it isn't as appealing as it could be. So costume's important. But for me, the most important thing that a writer brings, of course, is dialogue. And he had to really think about, how can this person talk like the doctor, but reference and accept the fact that you don't look like all the previous doctors, and other people aren't going to treat you immediately the same way they would treat a male walking into many of these situations. And so that was, to me, a very delicate dance. And I like this particular, you know, at the very beginning, right? She's like, I lost my sonic screwdriver. I could build one. I'm good at building things, probably. And we're all giggling, right? And because the doctor has to be funny. But then there was this, but she has to be competent. So you don't want the woman to not be competent, but any doctor would have said that, right? So it was a real, like, getting to know the voice of a character, and a character that has had similar but slightly different voices across all 50 years. They all have had their own way of doing things and their own sort of idioms. I think that's really delicate, but that line really stuck out to me, and you just can imagine thinking your way through it so long. And then I think this is really important because it keeps us with the theme, the overarching theme of the series, which is really about pacifism and about really attempting to bring peace to the universe, not war, even though, of course, David comes back from the Time War and all that stuff. But I think keeping that in mind and allowing a female character to bring forward that idea in a funny way. I'm a huge fan of Robert Redford and all that sort of thing, and The Way We Were is one of my favorite romances, and the idea that there was the Barbra Streisand character, ban the bomb, pushing for pacifism. It's a woman is always trying to say, let's not go to war first, let's get to the solution, because I don't want to see all the people I know get hurt. So I think that's very true, not just that she's a female character, but it's Doctor Who. That's the job, right? So we try to do it without a gun. Sometimes they show up, but they really don't belong there. They really don't belong there. Now, this was great out of Witchfinders. Obviously, he had to keep reminding the audience that this is different, and I have to deal with this difference, and we have to look in history about this difference, right? So literally, that's him, I think. That's Chris Chibnall talking to the audience. Okay, if I was still a bloke, I could get on with the job and not have to waste time defending myself. All right, but I understand that, and think about it, they were defending themselves in the public a little bit in the, whoa, what a choice you made. What a crazy choice. Why'd you do that? So in a way, sometimes when I'm watching movies, I'll hear a line and I'll say, oh, that's the writer telling us how they feel right now, right? And putting it in the mouth of the character. And this is one of those lines for me. I really think that was the impression that it gave me. Now, what you have to do when you're taking over a franchise like this that's been around forever and you're the showrunner, you have to remember its history. And I think you have to homage that to the new audiences so that they feel like this is new, but it's also old, right? I'm still in a world I understand and I appreciate. And for me, that's Demons of the Punjab because Father's Day was such a beautiful episode for Rose, I know. Anytime a character, of course, wants to go back and see a moment in history that they shouldn't be tampering with, and that's the temptation of being in a TARDIS, you can do that, should you do that. So I think it's so cool that he could have done that with any of the characters, right? Graham could have gone back to see something maybe that happened to him when he was younger. Obviously, Ryan could have gone back 10 years. He's kind of young, but I don't know, something might have happened when he was 12 that made him upset. But he decided to have Yaz go back, and to go back to a part of history that, again, in the United States, the partition, when did I ever learn about that in some high school history class? Barely, right? Unless you did maybe Western Civ, and even then they didn't really get deep into it. So to think about what's a piece that even in the UK, they need to remember their own history and always not the good parts, right? And the choices that were made. So what a perfect way to use Yaz, and what a cool thing to want to see your grandmother's wedding, and then, oh gee, it's a wedding. It's a wedding for Rose, and these are places you shouldn't have been. So I think that's a lovely bit. And of course, I'm tracing that all the way back to the original Star Trek, which is the ultimate sci-fi on TV, right? And this beautiful episode, which if you don't know it, you need to know, but won several science fiction awards back in the day by Harlan Ellison. With City on the Edge of Forever, right? Which is where Kirk falls in love with a woman, and when they, before Joan Collins, exactly, before Dynasty, and then learns, spoiler alert, that she's pushing for peace before World War II, and if she succeeds, Hitler will have time to rise, and he will in fact take over the world. So she has to die. And you're like, no, he's never fallen in love. Oh, yeah, it's great. Very funny. Very funny, very funny. And just the other day, right, William Shatner's now going to go up to space at the age of 90. Like, wow. Amazing how TV affects things. Really, it's William Shatner. He's just an actor from Canada. But he's Captain Kirk, right? In the same way, we could do a whole episode on, Star Trek and Lieutenant Uhura. That's why Mae Jemison is the first African-American astronaut, because she saw Lieutenant Uhura when she was a kid. She was like, oh, look, a black woman could be involved in space, and ta-da, she's the first astronaut. So just amazing the power of television, even more than films, because TV comes into your house. Really, I think, an important thing. Now, this homage business reminds me when I teach film history, we do this in movies all the time. Forget just remaking a movie. All you do is you take a storyline and you flip the genders and you have a new movie, right? So if you know It Happened One Night, it's it's the first movie ever to win all 5 of the major Oscars, a very big deal. Robert Riskin wrote it. It's the story of Clark Gable is a reporter who's following an heiress who's run away on the eve of her wedding. And of course, they fall in love on their little journey, and by the time they get home, they're going to get married. If you move to the 70s and the Electric Horseman, Robert Redford is a rodeo star who's become a celebrity. Jane Fonda is the reporter. He's run away with a major expensive horse because they're going to put the horse down or do something. And she follows him to get a story, but they fall in love. So it's exactly the same story, just flip the genders, right? So movies are always, writers always do this. We're homaging something we loved by giving a little flip. So I think that Father's Day and Demons of the Punjab fall into that. Now, I think it's really important to think about how then the writer, showrunner has to decide which of these episodes will be mine, and what do I want to say with mine. And even when it's not mine, I'm going to do the final rewrite. I'm going to do the polish to make sure it sounds like all these episodes are coming from one voice, right? Which is really why all of Russell's stuff sounds like Russell. In fact, anyone in here ever read Final Draft? The Writer's Tale, which is his book. Oh my gosh, I should have brought a copy of it. It's really thick. A journalist named Benjamin Cook asked him in the last season of the David Tennant era, could I email you and ask you questions about where you're at with your stories? And then we'll publish a book out of it. And Russell was like, sure, whatever. So what you get are things like, okay, so what are you thinking about tonight? And Russell will go, I don't know, it just occurred to me, what if water was like acid and could kill you? Can I play with that? And a few pages later, it's like, you know what? I'm going to do an episode on Mars. What if Martian water is actually what could kill you? And before you know it, you get to, he's writing Waters of Mars. So you literally watch from the idea through the execution of the story, right? And even there's a moment where he's discussing Waters of Mars where, like, it's not special enough. It's just another episode, but it's one of these, hour and a half ones. I got to do better. What would make it better? And then he writes, what if the doctor knows all these people have to die and he can't tell them? Now there are stakes. Now it means something. Now it's a special. And he literally, so it's a really cool, it's called The Writer's Tale. Again, it's really thick. But it's great. You're literally reading the on-time ideas coming through their head. And then to the very end, and some of the stuff when he's doing Torchwood, Children of Earth, he's talking about. And then at the very end, when he writes his last episode, and they go to the table read, and then he goes home, and he's like, now what do I do? Like, now what do I do? So the writing of your own work and the rewriting of other people is a very important part of your job. And I think this quote sticks with me from Rosa. And I don't know if Mallory Blackman wrote it or if Chibnall wrote it, but tiny things can change the world, which is that lovely moment at the end of Rosa. So it's not just a story about history in the United States, because now there is this meteor named after her, right? So the idea of the bigness of all of this, right? And that we're all part of the same planet, which really goes back to Star Trek again, and we should all come together. I think that's so truly a part of Doctor Who that he captured in that line. I just love that moment. I think it's so beautiful. And I think amazing the way that stories we see on television affect our lives and help us make choices and ideas and think about who we are. So that to me is the biggest job that he did. Again, he had to cast this room full of these people, and I think he did a good job with all of those. So I really think he did a good job. I know we're not all completely always happy with him, but I think he made a promise and he came through on it. And to me, that's pretty successful when you're handed a franchise that's 50 years old, and what new thing are you going to come up and do with it? So that's my story on Chris Chibnall. Thank you all for coming. And totally, obviously.